The film begins by showing an Indian Special Forces member named Amrit who has just finished his duty and is returning to the military base with his colleague and friend, Varesh Chatwal. While on a break, Amrit receives a phone call informing him that his girlfriend, Talika Singh, is being arranged to marry another man. Without hesitation, Amrit decides to meet Talika before the arranged marriage takes place. Sometime later, Talika and her family are seen arriving at a hotel where they will host a party before her engagement to the man chosen by her family. At that moment, Amrit secretly joins the party and meets with Talika, persuading her to call off the engagement and elope with him. Unfortunately, Talika says she cannot do that because she fears disappointing her family. Meanwhile, Varesh, who is also with Amrit, is waiting in front of the hotel for the signal from his friend, who plans to whisk Talika away. Unfortunately, the plan fails as Talika refuses Amrit's invitation, wanting to avoid any trouble during the party. Amrit and Varesh eventually return to the hotel, and amid his disappointment, the Special Forces member receives a message from Talika informing him that she and her family will be traveling to New Delhi by train the next day. Therefore, Talika invites Amrit to come along so they can discuss their relationship. The next day, Talika and her family arrive at the train station, but she is seen distressed about the future of her relationship with Amrit. Although Talika wants to cancel the engagement and marry Amrit, she is very attached to her family and cannot bear to reject her parents' wishes. That night, a gangster named Fani is seen rushing to the train station with his henchmen after receiving orders from Benny, his boss and also his father, to rob a train passing through their area. Upon arriving at the stop station, Fani and his men board the train to New Delhi, which is their target. Unexpectedly, the train turns out to be the one carrying Talika and her family. Fani, who pretends to be a passenger, even asks Talika, who has just come out of the restroom, for directions to the train car. When Talika is about to return to her train car, she is surprised to find Amrit, who is already on the train, and he invites her back into the restroom. Amrit then quickly kneels and shows Talika a ring he brought, proposing to her. Without hesitation, Talika removes her engagement ring and puts on Amrit's ring, signaling that she accepts his proposal despite not having her family's blessing. Shortly afterward, Amrit, who has returned to his car with Varesh, is seen happily exchanging messages with Talika. Meanwhile, Fani and his henchmen begin to enter the car where Talika and her family are to start their heist. Before taking action, Fani deliberately engages one of the security officers in conversation until Fani suddenly pulls out a machete and kills the security officer of the train. At the same time, one of Fani's henchmen deliberately shuts down the train's internet and cellular networks so that no one can report the robbery to the police. When the signal is lost, Fani and his men start threatening the passengers in the car with sharp weapons, demanding that they immediately hand over their valuables. Talika, witnessing this, appears very frightened and worries about her younger sister, Ahayana, who is alone in the restroom. Therefore, she intends to go after her younger sister, but Fani blocks her. Talika's father, Baldev Singh Thakur, seeing this, immediately protects Talika from the gangsters who are not hesitant to assault women and children. Shortly thereafter, Ahayana exits the restroom and is shocked by the chaos occurring on the train. At that moment, she appears confused by what is happening on the train she is on. On the other hand, Baldev continues to try to protect Talika by threatening Fani and the others to not harm his family. Despite this, Fani even beats Baldev into unconsciousness, causing Talika to scream hysterically. Fani then orders his henchmen to gather the passengers' valuables and have them disembark from the train. However, upon discovering that Talika comes from a wealthy family, Fani decides to abandon the plan to disembark and opts to take Talika and her family hostage instead. In another car, Fani's henchmen have also confiscated belongings from Amrit and Varesh without realizing that the two men they robbed are Special Forces members. At that moment, both are seen intending to help the passengers who are being robbed, especially Talika's family who are being held hostage. Without wasting any time, Amrit and Varesh fight back by attacking the robbers. With good teamwork, the two of them manage to subdue the gangsters in that car, including killing one of the armed gangster members. Shortly afterward, the two Special Forces rush to Talika's car to rescue her. Without wasting any time, Amrit and Varesh manage to confront all of his henchmen, while Fani chooses to flee to another car. When Amrit ensures Talika's safety, he and Varesh plan to pursue Fani, who has joined his gang members and is grieving Kumar, one of the senior gangsters. At this moment, Fani appears enraged and orders his men to hunt down Amrit and Varesh to avenge his death. Fani and his men, full of rage, start searching for Amrit and Varesh without realizing that the two Special Forces members have set a trap for the gangsters. They could easily defeat the gangsters, but Fani takes a boy hostage in the car, rendering Amrit and Varesh powerless. Fani then seizes the opportunity to shoot Varesh in the shoulder, which ignites Amrit's anger. Without hesitation, Amrit resumes attacking his men, while Fani continues to assault Varesh with a knife, taking him hostage. Meanwhile, Amrit manages to subdue one of Fani's men named Kully. In his fury, Amrit drags Kully to the car's exit. Soon after, Talika and Boldev arrive to assist Amrit in tying up the gangster. Amrit then threatens to throw Kully out if he doesn't reveal Fani's plans. Not wanting to die, Kully eventually discloses Fani's entire plan to rob the passengers, especially Talika's family. After obtaining this information, Amrit approaches Talika and her family to discuss the next steps. Although Boldev does not approve of Amrit's relationship with his daughter, he has no choice but to follow his experienced military guidance. Meanwhile, Varesh is taken to the car where the other gangsters are gathered. Shortly after, Fani contacts Benny to inform him of Kumar's death. Benny appears shocked and then instructs Fani and the others that he will board the train at the next stop. When Benny boarded the train, he couldn't hide his grief over the loss of a gangster he considered a brother. To vent his frustration, Benny brutally attacked Varesh until he was unconscious and then ordered Fani and his men to retaliate against Amrit, who was now holding Kully hostage. Without hesitation, Fani climbed onto the train roof towards the car where Amrit was, while his men would hunt Amrit from inside the car. At the same time, Amrit, planning to confront the gangsters, gave a knife to Talika so she could protect herself. Initially, Talika refused to take it and wanted to stay by his side. After Amrit explained that he would face the gangsters, Talika reluctantly accepted the knife and allowed Amrit to proceed with his task. A short while later, Amrit was prepared with a chain as his weapon. Upon seeing the gangsters in front of him, Amrit began attacking them, though he was eventually overwhelmed by the large number of opponents. Fani's men even managed to injure Amrit by stabbing him in the chest and pulling his neck with the chain. Amrit was then brought before Benny, who continued to beat him into submission. Fortunately, Varesh regained consciousness, quickly freed himself, and began fighting the gangsters to rescue Amrit. In the chaos, one gangster who tried to fight the two Special Forces members accidentally stabbed a young boy who was a passenger on the train. Seeing this, Amrit's anger intensified, and at the same time, Fani's henchman Makun struck him on the head with metal inside the train, causing him to fall. Meanwhile, the boy's older brother, seeking revenge for his brother's death, attacked Makun. Despite his injuries, Amrit rose again to assist the young man. On the other side, Fani managed to enter the car where Talika and Boldev were, causing a panicked Talika to point the knife given by Amrit at Fani. Boldev then distracted Fani, who was cornering Talika, giving her a chance to attack and wound Fani. This attack only enraged Fani further, and he seized the knife from Talika and stabbed her to death. Amrit, witnessing the scene from another car, could do nothing to help the woman he loved because Makund continued to block him. Similarly, Boldev, who had been beaten by Fani, was unable to stop his brutal actions as he now threw Talika's body out of the car. Talika's death seemed to be the most heartbreaking moment for Amrit, leaving him with no strength to fight the gangsters who continued to overwhelm him. In his grief, Amrit could only stare at the bloodstains of Talika on the car door while recalling all the beautiful memories he had with his beloved. Amrit began to regret not being able to save his girlfriend from the gangsters who had now taken over the entire car. Driven by his anger, Amrit vowed to avenge her death against the gangsters. Amrit then began to attack each gangster in front of him until they were dead. Seeing that his friend was truly enraged, Varesh remained silent and let Amrit settle his score. Using a fire extinguisher, Amrit approached the car where Benny and his men were to confront them. Unable to fight, Benny immediately ordered his men to resist Amrit so that he could escape. Fearlessly, Amrit continued to face the gangsters. In the front car, Benny met Fani and the remaining gangsters. At that moment, Fani seemed indifferent to all his fallen comrades and intended to leave the train with the loot. Benny appeared frustrated by his son's selfishness, especially as the situation worsened due to his actions in killing Talika, which meant they had to face Amrit. a special forces member. On the other side, Amrit brought the severely injured Varesh to the car where Boldev was for treatment. Meanwhile, Boldev informed his family about Talika's death at the hands of the gangsters. As the result, everyone mourned Talika's death. In the midst of this mourning, Amrit remembered his promise to Talika to bring back a hyena who was still missing. Without wasting time, Amrit resolved to search all the cars. Varesh said he would accompany him, but Amrit refused and asked Varesh to stay in the car due to his serious shoulder injury. Meanwhile, the gangsters were seen torturing several train passengers, unaware that Amrit was preparing to fight them by looking for items belonging to other passengers that could be used as weapons. When he noticed someone entering the car, Amrit quickly hid and realized that the newcomers were passengers. Therefore, Amrit promptly evacuated all the passengers to a safer location. In the gangster's car, Makund and some of his associates asked Benny for permission to search for Amrit. Benny granted the permission, and Makund and the others proceeded to attack Amrit, who was still evacuating passengers. Using his strength, Amrit managed to defeat the gangsters and demanded that one of them inform Fani and the remaining gangsters that they would soon meet their end at his hands. Upon hearing the message brought by his men, Fani became even more enraged and intended to kill Amrit immediately. However, this idea was opposed by some of his men, leading to an argument among the gangsters. Benny eventually intervened, ordering some of his members to leave the train with the looted goods. The remaining members were tasked with eliminating Amrit, who could cause them more trouble, especially since he was part of the Indian Special Forces. Following these orders, Fani and his men went to search for Amrit. When they entered a car, they were shocked to find the bodies of gangsters hanging from the train ceiling. In one of the car's toilets, Amrit, who had treated his wounds, climbed onto the train roof to search for the remaining live gangsters. After successfully entering a car where the gangsters were located, he quickly took them all down. The scene then shifts to Fani and Benny, who were debating their different approaches to the situation. As a result, Fani decided to move on his own, while Benny waited for reports from his men about Amrit. On the other side, Amrit, who had reached a car, teamed up with the passengers to fight the gangsters. Boldev deliberately started a small fire at the train door to prompt the police at the next station to inspect the train. The plan worked, and the police boarded the train to investigate the fire, eventually meeting Varesh, who informed them about the ongoing robbery by the gangsters. Meanwhile, Benny and the remaining gangsters were trapped in a car and unable to escape from the train to avoid the police. Fani, not wanting to be captured, decided to jump off the moving train. The police, realizing this, tried to shoot at Fani, but he managed to escape by hiding in the bushes. Shortly after, Fani decided to return to the train, realizing he needed to save Benny. Amrit continued to corner the gangsters still trapped inside the car. With fewer members, Benny deliberately captured a hyena and took her hostage to allow their escape from the train. The situation became even more chaotic as the gangsters threatened to kill any passengers who resisted until the police arrived and began shooting at the gangsters. Meanwhile, Fani, who had climbed to the top of the train, confronted passengers in another car and fought with all the police officers stationed there. Fani then tried to approach a hyena, who was now saved by Boldev. At the same time, Benny and his remaining men, trying to join Fani, had to face Amrit, who had deliberately turned off the car lights to make it easier to eliminate the gangsters. Returning to the car where Boldev and his family were, the situation grew more chaotic as Fani managed to incapacitate all the police officers guarding the car. Varesh, witnessing this, had no choice but to step in despite his severe injuries. With his remaining strength, Varesh fought Fani, but he ultimately killed Varesh with a knife. When Amrit learned of this, he slumped in despair. But with Fani continuing to taunt him, the Special Forces member rose again and ruthlessly fought the gangsters. Driven by revenge, Amrit killed the gangsters one by one, including Fani, who had killed his fiancée and friend. Soon after, the train stopped at the nearest station, where the police, having received word of the train hijacking, began evacuating all the passengers. At the end of the film, Amrit is shown sitting on a bench at the station, enduring the pain from his injuries, when he suddenly sees Talika appearing, smiling, and leaning on his shoulder. Moral lesson from the story: if you want to avoid a train wreck of a relationship, always check if your partner's family is on board before proposing on a moving train. And if a gangster shows up, maybe keep the ring and your rescue plans on the same track.